Everyone. Hey all. My name's Julie Allen, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer with Watch Me Learning Services. And thanks so much for joining me on this live. So today I wanted to discuss what I consider to be, and again, this is kind of a tricky thing to talk about, right? What's the most effective thing you can do, or what's the number one thing you can do to create effective online courses and training? That's a complicated question, right? It deserves a complicated, nuanced answer, but this kind of comes out of a conversation I was having with a potential client the other day, and she's in sort of the early process, the early stages of creating an online course. And she asked, what's in your opinion, like what's the most effective thing I could do, right? What's the number one thing you would prioritize? And in my experience, that is creating effective or creating good online objectives, online learning objectives or performance objectives. And what is a learning objective? What is a performance objective? Basically, this is a statement, if you will, of the key skills that you want your learners to be able to do by the end of your course, right? So we're creating a course, we're creating a training because we're trying to address some kind of problem, right? Like maybe sales are down, maybe people are getting injured on the job, maybe you're really passionate about a particular topic, you really love birds and you want to help people identify different types of birds in your area, right? Like there's something you want people to be able to do, right? Going back to the idea of maybe people are being injured on the job. It's kind of figuring out what are the things that people are doing now that's causing them to get injured, and figuring out what is it that they need to be able to do in order to not get injured, right? And that's a bit of that could be a whole separate live, right? Doing a needs analysis and kind of figuring out what those things are. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want to do before you put pen to paper, if you will, before you create your course, before you create your materials, you want to identify what are those key skills, those key things that you want folks to be able to do by the end of your course. And so I came up just really quickly off the top of my head. I kind of came up with an example, right? Because what does that mean? It's all well and good to say, kind of what a performance objective, what a learning objective is. Well, let's say, for example, that I was working on a course on AI. Let's say I'm part of a business unit at an organization, and I've been tasked with creating a training for people who are going to start using AI tools on the job. And so just, kind of quick and dirty learning objectives, but thinking again, like what are the key things that I want folks to be able to do by the end of the course? Maybe that is something like I want them to be able to define what artificial intelligence is, because that's kind of a tricky thing. Sometimes something is marketed as AI, and it's not really AI, or what AI is can be that's a nuanced question. So maybe that's the first thing I want people to do is I want them to be able to define what AI is, right? I want them to be able to identify the ways AI can be applied in their particular department, and I want them to be able to select the most effective AI tools for their position, for their specific tasks and their specific responsibilities. So these again, like let's say it's going to be kind of a short, I want it to be kind of a quick and dirty training. Like these are the key things that I want people to be able to do by the end of the training. But let's say now that we're switching gears a little bit, let's say we're going to take that training, but we're going to adapt it for managers. We're going to adapt it for the people who are in charge of actually procuring the tools, right? Putting them through security review and this kind of thing. So maybe some key objectives for that kind of a course would be I want them to be able to evaluate the potential ethical and legal issues of using AI tools in their department, right? So now we're kind of getting a little bit higher level, like you're the one who's going to be procuring, right? In selecting. So you really need to be able to evaluate, like make decisions, like think about like what those ethical and legal issues could be, right? And make those decisions, make good decisions in terms of like which tools you're licensing, right? So you don't get the department or the company into any kind of trouble. And ultimately I want people to be able to develop a plan for safeguarding protected data and intellectual property when integrating AI tools into a work stream. So again, I mean, there's so many different ways you could take that, right? But the idea is like we really want to hone in on like what are the key things that we want folks to be able to do. And this is something I just wanted to say too. This is something I certainly practice what I preach in terms of my own when I'm creating stuff, when I'm creating like my own personal courses. I mean, a lot of times when I'm in my professional capacity, I'm working with others to help them create their courses and their materials and their trainings. But even when I'm creating my own stuff, this is something that I do, and I cannot tell you how helpful it is on a variety of fronts. But for example, this was in a previous position, but I was tasked with creating a webinar for faculty on how to you just basically kind of like quick and simple. I mean, accessibility is not quick and simple in a lot of cases, but like for folks who are just new, who really didn't know how to integrate accessibility principles into creating online courses, what were some kind of quick and simple tips that people could use to make their courses more accessible? And right, that's a big topic. Accessibility is a huge topic. Web accessibility is a big topic, and it can be very complicated. And it's one of those things I had 45 minutes to an hour. Um, and I started to, kind of list, right, like all the things that I could talk about, and the list was getting longer and longer and longer. And so I really stepped back and said, like, okay, when I work with faculty, right, again, kind of doing my needs analysis, when I'm working with faculty, when I'm talking to faculty, what are the things that I typically see people struggle with? And what are the key things that they typically want help with? And what are the things that I think, like, realistically, again, if you're new to this, to this world, like, what are the things that realistically you can kind of start with that won't overwhelm you. And so I made my list of objectives, and I ended up going with 3 objectives because, again, realistically too, we had 45 minutes to an hour. So what do I realistically think folks are going to be able to do by the end of that hour, right? I'm not going to You're going to be able to make, you're going to be able to implement all the WCAG standards by the end of this, 45 minutes. Like, no, no, no. But maybe you can identify 3 strategies that you can implement in your course, right? Or maybe you can identify one accessibility issue in your course that would be causing causing some stress and causing some problems for your students, right? Like, kind of, again, low hanging fruit. And that really helped me, again, because I was looking at this list, and that gave me clarity. Like, okay, like these are the things I think I can reasonably expect people will be able to do by the end of this webinar. And I really was able to tailor my content to that, right? It's kind of like, it helped me kind of figure out, like, this content might be really good for another webinar, maybe a part 2. Um, this stuff, maybe even a part 3, right? Like, it's just, this is too much for an introductory webinar. Again, kind of, if I'm really aiming this at folks who are really brand new to accessibility. And it really helped me. So I didn't spin my gears. I didn't spend a bunch of time putting together all this material only to find that I had to jettison a bunch of it because I was running out of time. So, so again, I think I'm, kind of, I told myself I was going to keep this live short and sweet. So I think I'm kind of getting to the end of my time here, and I don't want to hold you up. But again, that is to say, like, if you're creating a course, if you're working on something right now, if you're working on a training, you're just getting started and you're really not sure, again, like, how to make sure that that course is effective and it does what you say it's going to do. Create those performance objectives, create those learning objectives, sit down and list what are the key things that I need folks to be able to do by the end of this course. And by the way, this is something you can put in front of learners if you want to. It can, again, if you tell them at the beginning of their training, or at the beginning of the course, like, and you don't have to necessarily list them out as objectives, right? But, giving them like the lay of the land, like, this is what you're going to be able to do, can be really, really helpful. It can help folks understand, like, again, a key thing with training, right, is, what does this mean to me? Like, what am I going to get out of this, right? People typically don't care, if they can't really see how something's going to be applicable to their lives, like how it's going to help them. So that, objectives can really be a great way too of telling people, like, okay, this is exactly what you're going to get out of this, right? This is exactly what you're going to be able to do. This is how it's relevant to you. And that can, again, it can increase engagement. It can be that hook. It can get buy-in to your course. But it also too, again, it's just really going to help you make sure that you are designing a learning experience that is centered around action, that is centered around effectiveness, that is centered around making sure that you're giving people the critical information that they need in order to be able to solve that problem that you want to solve. And also, again, that you are creating learning or activities, whether that be like an actual assignment that people do, whether that be an activity, whether that be a branching scenario that people complete. That again, you are creating interactions, you are creating activities, you are creating learning experiences that again allow people to practice and apply the key skills that you want people to be able to do. Because otherwise, again, what's the point of creating training if again it's not moving people towards specific performance, if it's not moving people towards specific business goals, if it's not moving people towards an actionable thing that you need them to be able to do. So again, thank you so much for attending. And my name is Julie Allen, and it was great chatting with you.